Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Income Gaming, Cheltenham's premier friendly local game store. Check the link in the description. Warlord Games very recently released ABC Warriors, and they kindly sent me a copy of the starter set, Increased the Peace, and you can take a look at my little unboxing and review of that here. But this video is not about that. This video is my first painting tutorial based on the box. Welcome to Miniature Realms. My name is Stuart, and in this video I show you an easy way of painting the Hammersteins. So I started by priming the miniatures black, ready for the first layer of paint, and the idea is to make this a fairly simple painting tutorial, though I do use an airbrush and I am using varnish and oils and things like that, but hopefully that won't put you off when you find out how simple it is. So first up, I'm going to be using Scale Colours Metal and Alchemy range Black Metal. This is a dark gunmetal style metallic. Now I'm using an airbrush to apply it. I'm starting top down. It's not quite a zenithal, but I do want to retain a little bit of the shadow that's there in the black. If you're not an airbrush user, you can do a really good all over dry brush, slowly building up the layers so you get a nice smooth base layer, or you can just do a solid full paint if you wish to as well, but by doing the dry brush you would keep some of that shadow as well. The next layer is Game Air Silver, and I'm repeating the same process with the airbrush, focusing from top down and trying to leave some of that darker gunmetal colour underneath and really kind of building up a bit of highlight already into the miniature. Again, if you do this via dry brushing, you can control this, keep it in the top areas more and give yourself a natural highlight. I like to make the weapons look a very slightly different kind of metal, so I'm going to be using thrash metal from the same scale colour range. I'm just dry brushing this on fairly heavily over all the weapons. There's a gun on each of them and there's a little blade on Hammerstein himself. Once all that is dry, I'm turning to gloss varnish. This is a Vallejo, ready through the airbrush. Again, if you don't use an airbrush, you could apply this by brush, or you could buy a rattle can. If you use a rattle can, be careful because some of those can come out pretty thick. You don't want to obscure all the detail. You could also skip that varnishing stage if you want to. You can do the later stages without it. You just need to be a little bit more careful. And while that varnish is drying, I'm carefully here just applying my base layer using some Diorama FX Dark Earth, and this is my base texture. Again, this is just time saving. It will take a little bit of time to dry, so why not let it dry at the same time that the varnish is. And also the oil paint effects that I'm going to be using on top is going to go on the base as well, so this will be killing two birds with one stone. So now with that fully dry, we're heading over to the oils, and I've got dark mud and I've got dark stains. These are from the Soilworks range, which is ready mix oil wash from scale 75. You can also look at some of the AK interactive enamels and things like that. Well, very similar effects, some of their pin washes. Now this is the dark stains. What I'm doing here is using it a bit like a pin wash. Now I'm being a little bit messy here because I'm going to tidy it up later on, but essentially I'm adding shade. And the difference to this, rather than using something like Nuln oil, is that you can take your time in cleaning it up, and where it pulls it doesn't matter because it will wipe off afterwards, whereas the Nuln oil or something like that, you have to be a little bit more precise and a little bit neater, because if you don't take it up and tidy it off straight away, you find it very hard to remove it afterwards. And that's why I love using oil washes, and for anyone who hasn't tried them, I really recommend them. It makes painting so much easier. So spend a little bit of time going around the miniature, placing the oil wash in all of the recesses, letting it run around the panels, and it will really give you some fantastic definition later on. So I'm using the Dark Earth, which is the browner mix on the weapons, again just to make them stand out a little bit more, give them a slightly different tone to the rest of the metal. This change isn't essential, it's not something you have to do, but I do think the little touches like that can really add to the overall effect. And as I previously mentioned, the reason for doing the basing earlier so it would dry, because I'm adding that same mud effect in splotches to the base. You'll see I've added a few little white rocks. This is just cat sand kitty litter. Again, if you just stick it straight on with a bit of super glue and pop your oil wash over it, and you get a lovely effect. Now I've left this to dry for an hour or so, and I'm coming back with a bit of old sponge. This is from inside a figure case, and I'm just using it to wipe off the oils. What happens at this stage, the oil paint has become tacky. You can wash it completely off with white spirit, but if you just rub it off like this, it stays within the recesses. And you end up with this really nice shaded miniature, and when it dries, not only will it shadow, it'll also look like ingrained dirt and has some realistic life to it, which is a fantastic effect. So it's a matter of taking your time, working your way around, definitely removing it off any of the flat surfaces, but not trying to rub it all off. You don't want to take it all back off and under your work. You want to leave it in all those recesses. It's quite hard to see when I'm doing it like this, but you'll see the effect later on. Now, this is Artist White Spirit. You can pick up Sansador as well. They don't smell as harsh as the DIY stuff. What I'm doing here with an old brush and a little bit of White Spirit on my brush, I'm just going in and tidying up those panels where the brush didn't remove it and there's still sort of areas of black oil or brown oil paint in the flat areas that you want to tidy up. And this just finishes it off really, really nicely. And this really is the joy of working with oils. You couldn't do this with a Citadel wash. Now, I like Citadel washes, I use them, but for metal effects and things like this is just perfect, and it's a really, really easy way to come back and do it. Now, the reason for the gloss varnish is because it really makes this stage a little bit easier, and it protects the miniature as well. You can do it without, and these metallic paints from Scale 75 are pretty robust, so you can probably do what you do here, but it's just that little bit easier, and you can be that little bit rougher. Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Baron of Dice, premium wargaming dice. Over 500 styles, over 4,000 customer reviews. Welcome to the best dice on the planet. So now we're moving on to Game Air Silver, which we've used already, to go back and add a bit of a dry brush. Now, I've waited a good few hours, a good 6 hours for those oils to dry a bit more. If you can wait overnight, even better. If you do it when they're still tacky, when you dry brush, you will see it coming out on the brush. It means that you're smearing some of that oil paint that's in the recesses, and you don't really want that, so it's worth just allowing it to dry. If you're in a hot climate, stick them outside because it will dry super quick. You can always blast it with a hairdryer as well. If you do that, be careful with resin miniatures. You don't want to get them so hot that they miss shape, so just take your time with it. But this dry brush here is just picking out some of that top detail, really making it pop, and you end up with this nice transition between the dirt and grime in all the recesses and the edges where the metal has been knocked or worn, looking really shiny. Now we're moving on to our golds, and we have Viking Gold and Elven Gold also from Scale 75, the same metallics range. The Viking Gold goes on first, painting in all the badges and the lettering on the Hammerstein models, and then we'll use the Elven Gold later on to highlight. There's really not an awful lot of extra detail on these miniatures to pick out, so this stage is pretty quick. I just use the studio paint jobs as a guide rather than the comics or something like that. I'm not a super expert on ABC Warriors, so I'm going from Warlord Games' own descriptions of paint jobs for them. I'm sure there's been many variants of colour schemes over the years in the comics and things, if they're anything like other comics anyway. For that Elven Gold top highlight, I'm just focusing on some of the top areas, so the dots on the stars and on the top half of some of the letters, just to give them a little bit of contrast between the base, and it just makes them pop and stand out a little bit more. Back now with another Soilworks pre-mixed oil wash. This is Grease, which is a sepia kind of colour, and I'm just trying to pick some of that definition back out where we have painted in the gold, so just around the stars, around the letters and things like that, allowing it to run into the recesses. I've not varnished here, didn't need it, it's just a small area, so this is an example to show you that you can just use oils straight on top of paintwork, and as it's such a small area, I wasn't going to go back and re-varnish again. I also took the opportunity to add a little patch of the grease oil wash on the weapons to add a little bit of definition, and then around all of the tracks at the bases of their feet as well, just to make them look a little bit different, a little bit dirtier as if they're running through. Once it dries a little bit more subtle than it looks at the moment when I'm slapping it on. Now I'm using some Pro Acryl Bold Titanium White, or any white would do here, and I'm just dotting in the eyes. We're going to put a glaze on top of the eyes later on, so the white base is a really nice base for that effect. So now we're heading to Turquoise, Caribbean Turquoise and Medium from Express Colour, which is Vallejo's own version of contrast paints. Just doing a 50-50 mix of medium and express colour here, mixing them in my palette. Now a lot of this stage is optional. Now this is the mix I'm going to be using for the eyes, but you'll see what I'm also doing here is painting in some of that comic book sort of blued metal effect, and this stage is absolutely optional. This is a little bit more advanced than the rest of it, so if you wanted to stop at the really easy simple stage, which is pretty much all dry brushing, then we've done that already. And this is me slowly building up this colour because I think it really adds to that comic book effect, and also gives you that semi non-metallic look effect, but we've obviously used true metallics here, so you've gone a halfway house of getting that style. Essentially what I'm doing here is I'm picking a panel, starting at the bottom in this case, and letting it pool at the bottom, and then slowly using a clean brush blending it up so it thins and feathers out back to the normal pure colour. The easiest place to target is those large areas on the legs and things like that, but also I'm adding it to the knee pads here. I'm deciding to go for the bottom areas, and it's a little bit your choice where you're going throughout the miniature. I tend to stick it towards the bottoms of the panels where the shadow may be, and then feathering up. And you may find you want to go back and do a second coat because it's quite thin. I don't want to go in too heavy, and then you add a little bit more just to darken it up as you go. So multiple layers is the right way to go. Once we start getting onto the shoulder pads and other areas, I'm also adding it around where the oil wash is at its darkest, where it's at its blackest. So it's just reinforcing where the shadow is, but it gives that a slight blue tone as well, which I think is quite a pleasing effect. You can place it at the bottoms of the weapons as well, so these hammer fists here, it just really looks nice. And again, if you want a bit of a clue, look at some of the comic book images, look at some of the studio paint jobs as well, because it'll give you a bit of an idea. So work your way around, and less is more. Add it into the recesses first and reinforce there, because those are the easiest bits to do. And then that will be just enough for you if you're a little bit unconfident about doing it. I appreciate if you're new to painting, or you're new to painting like this, doing a little bit of blending and feathering out might be something you see is scary. Now bear in mind this model is pretty shiny and has still got lots of gloss varnish on it, so you've got a little bit of time. If you suddenly stick it in the wrong place, you can go back with a clean brush and wipe it off. You can also just use your finger and wipe it off. So there's lots of save modes here if you do think you're going wrong, so have a go, have some fun with it. Now I return again with some Game Air Silver for a bit of a touch up and some extra highlights, and this, like the blue, is very much more of an advanced end to it for those who wanted to push it a little bit further. I really want to make those panels pop a lot more, and by doing some edge highlighting on some of them it really looks nice, especially when you add it around the edges of the panels that we've added the blue to. It just really aids that comic book look, and doing a thin line all around the edges really helps that. And you can see here I'm using the side of the brush, so I'm not having to do many thin straight lines until we get to the bottom here, and then it's just a case of a steady hand, bracing your hand against your other hand and drawing a little line around it. And I really like the way that looks. Again, if that's not for you, you don't feel like that's within your wheelhouse, you don't have to do it. The miniature looked pretty cool as it is anyway, and it looks pretty cool without the blue on, so you can do the blue and skip this bit, but if you really want to push it a little bit further you can do this bit, and it's still a relatively simple paint job. You could also come back and just dry brush this part around the edges, and just being very careful with your angles, maybe using a flat brush to dry brush and trying to hit some of those edges and not worry about the straight lines at the bottom like you can see me doing there. So optional, definitely. Is the effect pleasing? Yes, very much so, and it really catches the eye. I had lots of fun doing these, and painting all 4 of these miniatures only took me about 3 hours in total, and that is with filming, which is, you remove the drying times from that, leaving the oils to dry, but the actual painting time is relatively low to have something playable in the game, which is pretty cool in my book. And I'm looking forward to having a go at the other half of the starter box. The Volgans look fun, and see if I can do them as quick as well. The tutorial has given you some ideas of jump off points, how simple it is to get the basic metals down, and then by adding the blue you get that comic book look as well without going the pure non-metallic metal, which is a little bit tricky and definitely very time consuming. Well, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you've found it enjoyable or useful one way or another. I'm planning on completing the rest of the starter box, so doing the Volgans in a similar video, and then I'll do a video also on the piece of terrain that you get in the box as well. I do have lots of other videos planned around the same time, so do bear with me before that comes out, but I'm looking forward to doing it all the same. Thank you again to Warlord Games for sending me out the starter pack to review and to paint. And if you'd like to purchase anything from Warlord Games, I do have an affiliate link which is available in the video description. I also have it saved in a pinned post in the channel's Discord. And if you're not a member of the channel's Discord, it's well worth popping over and joining. There's lots and lots of really friendly chatter over there. I give a little bit of painting advice now and then, but there's lots of friendly painting support. And it's not all high-end stuff as well, people of all different abilities and levels there, and that's what it should be, just friendly chat about painting and gaming as well. And we cover absolutely any game under the sun, be that historical, be that sci-fi or fantasy. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do give us a like and maybe comment. It really helps the video get seen by others. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. There's lots of Warlord Games covered on the channel, as well as lots of other things as well, including the Old World from Games Workshop, which is featuring quite heavily at the moment. If you'd like to support the channel further, I also have a Patreon. There's many tiers on there. There's also a link in the description, so take a little look at that. You never know, there might be something that suits you as well. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.